I think the very best way to attract more wealth and abundance in our lives is to be open to the possibility that it exists, to surround yourself with people who are successful or who are open-minded to success, to ask people their secrets, to ask people to sit down with you and talk to you and share their secrets and share their ideas. I find it so interesting that so many people are frightened, again, worried, to ask people for help, to ask people, how did you do it? How did you make it? Instead, we almost act like we should know all the answers, and if things aren't working out, well, that's just the way it's always going to be. And there are so many people out there who absolutely love to talk about their own success and their own secrets and the ways that they do things. And I know that in my own life, I'm always constantly talking to people about how they do things. And there's as many different ways to create abundance as there are people who have become abundant. Everyone's got ideas. So you have to start with the premise that the information is out there. And to attract it, you got to surround yourself with people. I'm not just talking about really wealthy CEOs of companies and things like that. I'm talking about people who run successful restaurants or people who run a successful hot dog vending stand on the street corner. I mean, it could be anyone. It doesn't have to be people who make millions of dollars, but it's people who are enthusiastic and inspired by their work. I think the biggest obstacle to people creating abundance in their lives is a negative, pessimistic, closed-minded attitude. People who say, well, it's easy for someone else and I could never do it, and have all these very well-thought-out justifications why it's never going to happen for them. But I think if you're open-minded, if you have a job, is there a way that you could do that job better? Can that job lead to something else? Can you start your own business? Can you find a way within the company to make more money? Can you surround yourself with people who are going to give you your big break or to give you ideas? Or can you work in a different direction? I mean, there's so many different things to do. We live in a world of incredible opportunity where if you have a skill or if you have a niche or a passion about something, it is amazing what you can do. There was a fabulous book back in the 70s by Marcia Sinitar called Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow. And it sounds very simplistic, and it's not always quite that easy, but there's a lot of truth in that statement that when you do what you love, what you're passionate about, good things will follow. Now, a lot of people do things they love and they don't make very much money. I was talking to a teacher friend of mine a while back, and she was saying, well, do what you love and the money will follow, but I'm a teacher. I'm on a very set salary. I'm never going to make very much money. I said, oh, is that right? Have you ever thought about teaching courses on your own in the summertime? Have you ever thought about starting your own teaching institution and teaching other teachers skills that you have that they might learn from? There's so many different things that you could do. You get 2.5 months off every year. Who else gets 2.5 months off a year to do these kinds of things? And it sparked some ideas in her, and she started opening her mind to new possibilities. I mean, there's all sorts of examples such as this where people, by opening their minds and opening their eyes to what's out there, are able to see that there's more to the world than what's right in front of you. But you have to step up. You have to open your eyes. You have to be willing to ask. You have to be willing to look places that you might not have looked before. And I think this is the way to create abundance. I don't think abundance is something that just sort of sneaks up on you. I think abundance is something that you want to look for, not in a greedy way where you're sort of always after money. Abundance is different than money. Abundance is being enthusiastic about what you do, about feeling like you have enough, about feeling that you're making a valuable contribution to the world. And very often, if you fulfill these characteristics, then the money is going to follow. And I think if you put your mind to it and you really make a commitment to opening your eyes wider and to expanding your horizons, that you will find a way to create more abundance in your life. One of my very favorite sayings in life is, hold on tightly, let go lightly. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times people hold on to a dream or they hold on to an idea. They assume that life has to dish itself out in a certain way and that their expectations have to be met in order for them to be happy. We get very attached to certain outcomes. We'll say, okay, I'm going to turn in this proposal and boy, if everyone doesn't love it, I am just going to be devastated, or I'm going to write this book, and if it doesn't make the bestseller list, boy, that's going to be the end of the world. Or I'm going to be in this play, and if people don't give me a standing ovation, I'm going to be just hurt deeply. My pride and my ego are going to be damaged. Those are all examples of being what is called attached. Being attached to things creates pain and misery and holds you back. A really wonderful way to live is to learn to let go lightly, to become less attached to outcomes, to do the very, very best you can, to write your best book or write your best script or the best proposal or prepare your best speech or whatever it is that you're doing in your life, to do everything you can to put the odds in your favor and then let go of it and just see what happens. People who try this are oftentimes shocked because you win either way. If you are working on a project and you do everything you can to put the odds in your favor and you do the very best that you can and you let go of it, you just see what the universe has planned for you. A lot of times it'll work out well and sometimes it doesn't. And if you're not attached to the outcome, then you're not devastated when things don't work out the way that you would prefer that they work out. Now, that's a very important lesson in life, because if you're not attached and you're not in a lot of pain when disappointment comes, then it allows you to move forward and to bounce back and to be highly resilient and to move on to the next project. One of the things I've always been quite good at myself in my own life is handling rejection. And I remember back when I was first publishing books about 13 or 14 books ago, and I would get rejection after rejection after rejection, and I was completely unattached to it, but I always thought everybody would. I couldn't understand why people took it so personally, because my philosophy always was that I don't need every publisher to like my work. I don't need one publisher to like my work. So I would just look at it as a screening process. Okay, they don't like my work, and they don't like my work. Someone's going to like my work, and then sooner or later somebody did. I think what happens to a lot of people is their ego gets involved and they become very attached to the outcome. So they send out a manuscript or they put forth some sort of work out into the marketplace and it gets rejected. And when it gets rejected, they feel hurt and they hold on to the hurt and they analyze it and they think about it and they feel sad and they talk to their friends and they feel disappointed, and see how heavy that is, even in talking about it. When you can't handle rejection, when you can't handle a setback, that holds you down. It doesn't allow you to move forward. I always look at challenges and rejections and people not approving of what I'm doing as just speed bumps. You're moving on in your life and you get an obstacle and you have to go over the speed bump, and then you have another speed bump, and then life is smooth for a while, and then you hit another speed bump. And that's just the way life is. Life just dishes us out lots of challenges and opportunities for growth and to move on. And I think the less attached you are to outcomes, the happier you're going to be and the more abundance you're going to create in your life. A lot of times when you're rejected or someone doesn't like your work, if you can go back to that person and say, I really appreciate your consideration in looking at this, and I'm interested to find out why it is you don't like my work. Can you share with me what it is that you don't like? People will be shocked when you do that. They'll say, you really want to know my feedback? And I'll say, yeah, of course I want to know your feedback. You didn't like what I sent to you. What would you suggest I do differently? Well, very often they're so amazed and touched that you took the time and had the humility to come back to them and ask for their advice. They'll end up liking your work after all. It's just amazing. I remember when my work was being submitted to literary agents back early in my career, and the literary agent I really wanted was very harsh on my work. She didn't like it at all. She said, I can't represent you on this. And I said, oh, that's all right, but I really appreciate your comments. Could you recommend someone to me who might represent me, who might like this type of work? And she referred me to my agent, who's been my agent now for about 10 years. And she and I have turned out to have a great partnership, a wonderful friendship. She's one of my very best friends. And it all came about because of my willingness to not make a big deal out of the rejection, but rather turn it into an opportunity. And I think when you can look at life this way, it's amazing how resilient you become and how non-attached you become to outcomes and how many more doors open because you're not constantly turning people off by your own defensiveness and your unwillingness to listen. So the lesson here is to hold on tightly, which means work hard, put the odds in your favor, do everything you can to succeed, but then let go of it, because when you let go, there is freedom and peace that you may never have experienced. Many people recognize the importance of surrounding yourself with experts, and I'm certainly an advocate of this philosophy. I was talking to a plumber who had just finished his trade training, and he was asking me my advice on how I would suggest he go about getting into the plumbing business and become a successful plumber. And I said, well, how many times have you taken other plumbers out to lunch who are successful? He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you want to spend some time with plumbers and ask them how they build up their business. And it had never occurred to him, something that obvious. Now, this is a very bright man who's very good at what he does, but he started doing that. So he started taking people to lunch and breakfast and meeting them for coffee and picking their brain, and he was surrounding himself with experts in the plumbing field. And pretty soon he had about 100 years of experience combined with talking to all these experts. He had all these great ideas, and he was courageous enough to implement many of the ideas. And I think he was able to take a shortcut in building his business, and it became very successful very quickly. Whatever it is that you do, you want to surround yourself with experts. You might have to make 10 or 15 or 20 phone calls before you get someone who's willing to sit down with you. So you don't want to crumble when someone rejects you. You want to find people who are willing, and there will be people who are willing to sit down with you and talk to you and help you and give you tips. And one simple tip can change the entire course of your career. It can change the entire way you look at your life and your career and create enormous abundance for you. So let's take a look at some very specific, simple financial strategies that you might not have thought about before that you might want to bear in mind while trying to achieve financial peace. These are very simple things. They're very practical and I think very powerful if used correctly. A friend of mine gave me the suggestion that at first I kind of shoved off and I said, that's not a very good idea. It's kind of superficial. And he said, well, just give it a try. Keep a list of bargain places in your wallet or purse or in your car or somewhere that's convenient to you. So often we're driving around and you need to buy something and you want to get the best possible deal, but you can't remember all the names of the bargain places, so you end up spending twice what you need to. I've gotten in the habit, and a lot of my friends have done the same thing, where if you hear an ad on the radio or there's a closeout or someone tells you about some great restaurant that has great prices and has great seafood at incredible values, or a great jewelry store that's discounted 50%, it's going out of business, or whatever, there's just tons of examples. You write that down and you put it in your car. Then the next time you're in need of that type of establishment, you just go to your list and lo and behold, it's right there. It tells you where to go. A friend of mine just recently bought an engagement ring, and he went to his list and he was reminded of this incredible place that was selling beautiful, very high quality diamonds at incredible prices, and he went over there and he told me he saved over 50% of what he was going to spend anyways. So it's a very helpful tip that you might want to keep in mind. Another thing that's incredibly important, and this is very, very difficult to do, by the way, but it's worth it if there's a way to make it happen for you, is to sock away 2 years of living expenses. You hear all sorts of experts saying, well, it's really important to have 6 months of cash liquidity, and that is important. But something incredible happens when you actually have a few years of living expenses in the bank. On a more subtle level, what it allows you to do is to take chances that you would never have done before. I met someone recently who said, my dream is to become a writer. I'd love to do that. I've saved up enough money that I can live for a couple of years now, and I'm going to give my writing dream a try. Now, I guarantee that this particular person would never have the courage or the ability to do that had she not taken those important steps to save that money. A story that I write about in my book, Don't Worry, Make Money, is of a fellow that was given an opportunity to join a startup company many years ago, a very promising company, and wasn't able to do it because he was living right on the edge. He was making a lot of money, but his kids were in private school. He was driving expensive cars. He and his wife were living just a little bit over their heads, so they couldn't take the opportunity. Another person was able to take the opportunity because he had saved up a couple years of living expenses. You probably can guess the rest of the story. The company became magnificently successful, overwhelmingly successful, and the person who had taken the job is now a multi-millionaire because he had the freedom to take the risk to take the job. I think it's a pretty obvious implication, and you can see all sorts of practical implications in it. So I encourage you, if you can, it can be hard. It can take 4 or 5 years or longer to save those 2 years of living expenses, but in the long run, it's going to serve you well. Another idea that I encourage you to investigate carefully yourself and decide for yourself is the whole issue of a fixed rate versus a variable mortgage. A lot of people assume that a fixed rate mortgage is a very safe, conservative way to go. But if you look back historically, turns out that that's not really the case, that more often than not, taking the variable loan over the fixed costs you less money. Now, why don't people do that even though they can do the arithmetic? Worry, fear. You're going to have your mortgage for a long time, and it may very well be worth it to you to take that added risk if you really calculate how much money you're going to save. You might want to talk to your financial advisor about that and put down the numbers, because it can be shocking to you, the differences, depending on which numbers you use in your information. Keep in mind when you're deciding between a fixed rate and a variable rate that there are a lot of factors to consider, and that's why it's extremely important to talk to your banker or your financial advisor to help you determine which rate is best for you. Factors such as how long you intend to live in your house may play a factor, as well as other things. So again, the point here is to really take a careful look at the decision-making process itself. Are you assuming that the fixed rate is always the way to go and that you're not willing to take the risk because it's going to cost you less money, when in fact it may cost you a staggering larger amount of money? So really just take this into consideration, look at all the variables and all the factors, but don't take this decision lightly, because it can be a very big item over a long period of time. Another issue that I love to talk about that is, I believe, very important is to always buy large deductible insurance. You know, no one, including myself, will argue, or very few people I should say, would argue against the value of certain types of insurance. I have insurance, probably most of you do too. Insurance is certainly wise to have. But a lot of times if you look at insurance and if you step back from it, why do we buy insurance? We buy insurance because we worry. We worry about certain things that are going to happen. We're going to die, our car is going to be stolen or wrecked, or we're going to get sick, or we're going to become crippled or disabled in some way. If you look at the difference in cost between low deductibles and high deductibles, the difference is often staggering. I've been buying insurance for as long as I've been an adult, so I think the amount of money that I have saved by buying the largest possible deductibles over time is absolutely staggering. Now, I take that money that I save in premiums and I invest it in another fund, and that fund is designed for emergencies. So if something happens, the money's still there to help me should I need it. Almost nothing that we worry about actually happens. Occasionally, there are exceptions, things do happen, and of course you want to insure yourself against those contingencies. But this is a very important one, and I really encourage you to look at the numbers carefully and to not necessarily assume that you're being safer and wiser just because you're buying low deductible insurance. One of my favorite strategies to talk about that is very practical is to build up a large trust fund. Now, I don't know about you, but I used to think of a trust fund as being reserved for someone who came from a very wealthy, probably snotty family, and so people who had trust funds were spoiled and they had the easy life and all of this. I am not talking about that type of trust fund. What I'm talking about is the trust that you earn by being a person of your word. We're talking about integrity, of doing what you say you're going to do. I think of it almost like a bank account. You know, so many times in the course of a given day or week, depending on what you do and how you spend your time, you'll make little subtle promises. You'll say things like, "Oh, I'll stop by and see you tonight," or "I'll give you a call later on," or "Sure, no problem, I'll pick that up for you," or in my case, it might be something like, "Oh, yeah, I'll send you that book." What I've learned is that no single promise that you make is going to make or break your career, but over time, it adds up. Your credibility is diminished when you don't do what you say you're going to do, when you don't live up to your promises, when you're not a person of integrity and ethics. But when you are, when you prove to others that you are trustworthy, that you're qualified, that you're capable, that you're reliable, that you're full of integrity and that you care about other people, it always comes back to help you manyfold. I just know that in my life I've been blessed with the desire to be a person that does what he says he's going to do. I turn my work in on time. If I say I'm going to send someone something, I do it. I really try to make a concerted effort to really build the trust in other people. Then when I need something from them, they trust me. You know, they're more likely to help me. They're more likely to want to be on my side and to want to be part of my team. This can be very subtle stuff. I know quite a number of really nice people who will say things like, "Oh yeah, I read this great book, I'll send it to you next week." The book never comes. Now, it's fine to me that the book never comes, but it does send a certain message to me that when that person says they're going to send something, they're probably not going to send it. Other people will call their parents on the phone. I've heard many conversations on the phone, at least one end of the conversation, where the person will say, "Yeah, no problem, Mom, I'll stop by later on and see you after work." And then I'll ask the next day, "How was your mom?" "What? How was your mom?" "Oh, I didn't go see her." "What are you talking about?" "Oh, you told her that you were going to go see her." "I did?" See, we do this quietly, unconsciously. A lot of times we're not even aware that we're doing it. So my suggestion is to really pay attention to the promises you make, to really make a concerted and ongoing effort to be a person of your word and to live up to what you say you're going to do. Because when you build a very solid, secure trust fund in the eyes of others, it's going to come back to help you every single time. There are a lot of pessimists out there who insist that most successful people are successful because they got all the luck. It's an interesting discussion when you're talking about luck, because a lot of times there's a grain of truth in that. You know, I have a friend who was promoted not too long ago to a very high position in his company, and it's true he was lucky to get the position. There was a lot of very talented competition there. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that for many years he was going in before anybody else got there. He often left after everybody else left. He created his own luck. He has lots of friends in the business. He's kind to everybody. He's generous. He gives praise and dishes out praise very easily. He's not defensive. He's able to admit when he makes a mistake. He's able to apologize. In other words, he's setting the environment to receive luck. I had an experience of this in college myself when I was at Pepperdine University. I remember a very difficult class that I was taking in finance, and I ended up getting an A in the course. And no one could understand how I got so lucky. But what they didn't realize was that I created a lot of that luck myself. My teacher loved me. He knew that I was trying so hard. I went to every single after-hours opportunity that he gave to spend time with him, to pick his brain, to ask for extra help. I did all of the extra work. I read all of the extra books. I went out of my way to get help from this particular teacher. So was I lucky? Yeah, I probably was lucky. Did I deserve an A? Probably not. But did I create some of my own luck? Sure I did. And that's the way so much of luck is created. We put ourselves in a position to be lucky. So don't make the mistake that many people do of believing that luck is only reserved for certain people, because there's a lot of things that you can do to put the odds in your favor to create your own luck. One strategy that I would like to mention at this point is to keep in mind that cheaper isn't always better. Like many people, I grew up believing that buying something at the cheapest possible price was usually a good idea. And, it can be. But what I've learned is that cheaper really isn't always better. When you buy a used computer, for example, you might get a good price on it, but you have to factor into your decision-making process, are you likely to have to spend a lot of time bringing that computer down to the shop to get it fixed? Or the same thing might apply to a car or to any other major purchase that you might make. At first glance, it might seem that buying tires at a cheaper price might be a good idea, but if you buy a slightly more expensive version, they might last a lot longer so that you can avoid an unnecessary trip down to the tire store 6 months down the road or a couple years down the road, whatever the case may be. It's really important to examine this and to really factor in the value of your own time. I find it interesting that many people don't place much value on their time. I was speaking to someone not too long ago who was going to take a drive from San Francisco to Seattle, and I said, wow, that's an awfully long drive. Why are you going to do that? Why don't you just fly? It will only take an hour and a half or something like that. And he said, well, I really can't afford to fly. It's just too expensive, so I'm going to drive. What he didn't take into consideration was that he was a telephone salesperson, he could have spent the entire day on the telephone making sales and then got on the plane at night and flew to his destination. What he was in effect saying when he made his decision was that I don't really value my time at anything. Now, obviously, everyone's situation is different, and it's obviously easier said than done and all that, but I really encourage you to take a careful look at the decisions you make. Sometimes cheaper may be better, and other times it's not, but it's always important to weigh the pros and cons and to make the best decision in any given situation. One of my favorite concepts in business is something that I like to refer to as the critical inch. And I think of the critical inch as the most relevant, most important aspect of your business or of the job that you're trying to do. I think that one of the mistakes that many people seem to make is that there's a focus, too much focus, on aspects of the business that aren't all that critical. In other words, if you're a salesperson, there's a tendency that many people have to do everything but make those uncomfortable phone calls. A lot of times writers will spend a lot of time at their computer and they're organizing their desk. Now, these are very extreme examples, I understand that, but there's a way in which we do everything except the one thing that will really make us money or really bring us the gifts of what it is we're trying to achieve. I think one of the things that very successful people do is they're able to really zero in on what is it that's really most important in this business, and that's the concept of the critical inch. Be sure when you're pursuing a dream that you're really putting the necessary effort into that which is absolutely critical in your business. I think if you put some emphasis on this, you'll find it's going to pay great dividends. When I first wrote about the 1-hour solution in Don't Worry, Make Money, a lot of people absolutely loved it, but I did get a few people poking fun at me as being overly simplistic. A lot of the critics would say things like, what are you talking about? You can't make any money in 1 hour. It takes years and years to start a business. I could never do that. I could never do this. This solution, I have to tell you, does not apply to everyone, okay? I'll say that right up front. However, we live in a day and age when there are so many part-time home-based businesses that people can get involved with for so little capital. It's unbelievable. And there's no way on this series or any series that I'm going to advocate any particular one because I get myself into hot water that way probably. But I can tell you that my wife is involved in one. She's extremely successful, and she spends about an hour a day doing it. Now, she's backed off of it a little bit lately, but the business still runs itself. I encourage you to ask around for other people who are doing home-based businesses. Go to the library, go to the local bookstore, find out what's out there. There may be something for you. But here's what I'd like you to do if you decide to get involved in one of these businesses. What you need to do is spend 1 hour a day every single day, let's say 5 days a week, doing those parts of the business that are uncomfortable and important. The problem a lot of people have is they start a business and they do a lot of busy work and they fill up their schedules and they'll send out little mailings that are ineffective and that don't work, and then they'll complain about it and they'll say no one wants to do this. When my wife Chris started her business, she was doing all the things that make people successful, but she would only spend 1 hour a day doing it. She would make the phone calls, she would get the rejections, she'd make another phone call, she'd get the rejections, she'd make the phone call, and someone would agree to take a look at her business plan. And she did this over and over again, and she'd spend that hour wisely. She wouldn't fool herself with a lot of busy work and filling out papers and things like that. She would actually spend the time doing those things that were going to bring her income. And in a relatively short period of time, she built herself a pretty nice business. Now, we met people and continue to meet people who do really, really well with these businesses. Some people who become extremely financially successful with these home-based businesses. So again, the point of me bringing up this strategy or this solution for you in this series isn't to suggest that becoming successful isn't difficult or that this solution is for everyone. It's clearly not. But there are a lot of people who are looking for opportunities, and my hope in sharing this with you is to open your eyes to say, you know what, if you're a person who has a 9-to-5 job and you want to make more money, there are ways to do it. There are home-based businesses. You could start your own business that nobody else has started. But you got to do something. You got to step out of your comfort zone. You got to be willing to look around, try new things. I've never met a single person in my lifetime, nor do I expect to, who's ever made a lot of money by saying, you know what, I'm never going to make a lot of money. Nobody does that because it doesn't work. But yet that's what most people do. That's the extent to which most people work toward creating financial independence who don't have it. They'll say, well, there's no way for me to do it. I'm stuck. I've always been this way, and there's nothing I can do about it. You know what? There are things you can do about it. You can open your eyes. You can look around. You can ask people. And it's fun. It's fun to investigate new things. And maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you won't start your own business, but you'll learn some new way to communicate in your existing business. You'll learn some new way to talk to people to increase your sales volume or to increase some form of measurable way of improving the job that you currently have. So again, the suggestion is to be open-minded, to take a look at what's out there, and to do your best to put all the odds in your favor. I hope that this solution is helpful to you. It sure was to our family. I'll tell you something I'd just love to see, and that is if more people, more corporations, more small business people would really take a look at the importance of charity as it pertains to not only obligation and commitment to the community, but also to your own financial success and the feelings of rewards that you get from being charitable. It's such a privilege to do business, to have a job, to have a career in today's world, and it just seems to me so important to give back in whatever way that you choose to give back to the community, to tie in your success with your giving, whether it be selecting a certain percentage of your pre-tax income or your net income to charity, or organizing food drives or clothing drives or whatever the case may be, but to be involved in some way. There's an old saying, what goes around comes around, and what you give out always comes back to help you, and that's so true. And this certainly feeds into our discussion of worry. I mean, what is the major reason people don't give more to charity? And obviously it's that people are worried that if they give a lot, there won't be anything left for them, or there won't be enough left for them. And usually just the opposite is true, that when you give away, it's been said that giving and receiving are two sides of the same coin. What you give out comes back to you. It opens your heart. If you're worried for whatever reason that there's not enough to go around, then you certainly have to include yourself in that assumption, so that if you don't think there's enough money in the world, there must not be enough for you too. So you need to dismantle that worry and get rid of it and learn to be more charitable. I've met lots of really wonderful people, and I'll ask them, how much money or time do you devote to giving to others? And surprisingly, some really neat people say, oh, I'm going to get around to that later on, or something like that, or I'll give some thought to that. And surprisingly few corporations that I've spoken to are absolutely committed to giving a portion of their money back to the community. And there's all sorts of well-thought-out justifications for that. People say, well, I'm already taking care of the employees, and I'm already taking care of so many things that's our first obligation. And it very well may be, but there's something so special about becoming more charitable and to making a commitment to including charity as part of your ongoing business pursuits. Chris and I give away a certain percentage of our income, and it encourages us to do well because we like to give away more, and we are involved in several charitable agencies that are very near and dear to our heart, and it's just so much fun to be involved in charity, and it gives you such a feeling of warmth. And if you work with a company and the corporation or the business that you're involved with has one particular charity or organization that it likes to work with, it's another way of bringing all the employees together. It gives you a deeper purpose, a way of helping out people who are less fortunate than you. There's something just so wonderful about it. It makes you feel rich and nourished and proud of yourself and good about your efforts. It really enhances the quality of your life, and it's been my experience that the more you give, the more comes back in your direction. And it's a very difficult concept to prove, other than the fact that when you ask people who do a lot of giving, they'll always tell you, yeah, you know what, I gave away X amount, and lo and behold, even more was coming back towards me. You become more generous, you become more open. If you can't give away money, it doesn't have to be money. It can be your time, your love, your expertise, something with your church. People always say to me, well, I can't really give much money. What could I do? There's lots of things you could do. You could volunteer an hour a week of your time, or help out some organization. There's a church close by to our home where we live in the San Francisco Bay Area that every Saturday makes bagged lunches for homeless people, and it's just a wonderful program that they do over at the church. And there's just so many programs like this that you can get involved with. To me, it just makes your life complete. It makes you a better person and a better human being. It makes you happy with yourself. And I just can't encourage you enough to not only yourself, but to encourage the people you work with to become even more giving. And in doing so, I'm sure that it's going to help you in return. Sometimes people get very enthused about creating a consciousness filled with wealth, what might be called a wealth consciousness. And over time, they tend to lose their enthusiasm. So they always ask me the question. They'll say, well, how can I maintain wealth consciousness? How can I keep this in the forefront of my mind? How can my attitude remain positive and fulfilled and rich and open to new possibilities? And I think in a way that question answers itself, when you think about it. It's like the trick is to always look around you and see how much there is and look at all the wonderful things that people are doing in the business world and for each other and within their own lives. And you take a look around and you see the magnitude of possibilities and all the changes that are taking place. And if these changes are taking place, we're obviously all part of these changes. We can keep our minds geared and focused in the direction of abundance and remind ourselves how much there is out there and how deserving we are of these things. We all deserve to be a part of abundance and of a world of plenty. And I think the trick is to keep that attitude geared in that direction, to really remind yourself frequently of the many blessings that you have. It seems to me that the more emphasis that you put on gratitude and on abundance and on how lucky you are. It seems like when I wake up in the morning, and almost every day I'll do this, occasionally I forget, but usually I'll wake up and I'll count my blessings literally. I'll say, gosh, I'm just so lucky to have a family and to have a body that works well and to have friends and to love to read. And I think about all the people in my life that have helped me and who are kind to me and how blessed I am to be able to give back to the community and to have readers who enjoy my work and things like this. And when I put myself in that mindset, it reminds me of how special my life is. And I've been doing this ever since I was a little boy, always thinking about what's right. When I had a dog, I would be so happy that I had a dog when I was little and I had friends to play with. And I'd wake up just enthused about the process of life and what a gift it is. And I think when you put your mind on these optimistic aspects of life, this is not Pollyanna thinking, and I always chuckle when people say, oh, you're just such an optimist, and isn't that a bit much and a little bit Pollyanna-ish? And it really isn't, I'm just, I consider myself a realist because I look around at the world and I see good, and when you're looking for it, that's what you see, and that's the nature of wealth consciousness. So if you want to create miracles in your life and in your quest for abundance and more financial security and more financial freedom, keep your mind geared towards these more positive things. And I think very shortly you will begin to see that there's more to life than you could have possibly imagined.